Are you ready? This is part 5 of my building the Flying Dutchman. As you can see, I have the upper deck in place as well as these other decks. Now, they're just temporarily here. This is a dry fit, so I have them rubber band kind of holding things together, but it is fitting very well. I made a huge blunder. I inadvertently used the wrong wood. It should have been a very thin piece of wood, and I looked at my part sheet and I saw the dimensions. It was 2 by 5. It should have been 0.6 in thickness by 5 as far as width, and the lengths vary, and for some reason I picked up the same width but the thickness was 2 millimeters. What I ended up doing to correct it, because that would throw off everything by a millimeter, which isn't much, but it was going to raise my cannon barrels, so then all my windows change. So that was major, and I already had most of them done. I had done this lower deck in that for some reason. I'd done the upper deck and a couple of these parts. So my options were make the windows open wider, or peel all of these off and put on the right size, or sand this down. And I opted for taking my belt sander, and each one that I put this on, I ran it through the belt sander, and I did not get it exactly to the 0.6 thickness, but I just got it down to where I'm comfortable and everything does fit. So, talk about a setback and a moment of what in the world was I thinking when I did that. If you recall, I color coded my part sheet. There's no excuse. I had it color coded. Absolutely picked up the wrong plank and paid the price for it. Now I have to decide where I'm going to go from here, because I used a lot of those 2 millimeter thick planks that were to plank the sides of the ship. So I'm checking out either replacing those that I used about 65 of them, 65 pieces, or invest in the same size in black walnut and use black walnut, which I really like. Now I'm going to deconstruct the ship, and I'm going to show you what I decided to do on this middle deck as to the appointments that I put on it. It's not completely done, but I have a good start. So let me start taking this apart. Okay, I came up with some what I think are amazing ideas. Oops. And I'm not necessarily done. Let me reposition the camera here in just a minute. When I talked about this lowest deck being too thick and it raised all of these cannons, what I did is I pulled the cannons out and I actually sanded down flat the wheels of the cannon base, and that lowers the cannons just, a millimeter or so. So that should help on the windows there. I had spoken about getting some barnacles, and I do have quite a few, and this looks like it could be some sort of coral, and you'll see there's several in different places that I've put down here, and I would like some of you to guess what those are. This is a nice piece of coral here. I decided to go with the same theme. I actually watched a little bit of the movie, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and all the layers of the ship have sea growth in them because the ship is actually being taken over by the ocean. This is actually, this is one of those mud dauber wasps, I think they're called. You'll find them on the eaves underneath your roof of your house on the outside. Each one of these little pods would hold a baby wasp as it's developing. Now these were all empty already, and they happened to paint the condo that we live in, and they had removed this, and it was quite large actually, and I just cut it down and decided, wow, that works perfectly. I'm also experimenting with painting it some just to see what I could come up with. So far that's been a bust. That was just the initial start to get a dark layer, and then I would lighten it up. But I decided to just stick with the natural. I like that quite a bit. A lot of this is similar to the lower deck, just not quite as much because the sailors would have to walk around somewhat. You can see I have some distressed cargo back here. I have some barnacles in here somewhere. There's a little set of barnacles right there. And there's one down there. A larger barnacle back there. Some barrels. Another barnacle. And some more supplies. I will probably add more things like this as I go, but for now it's a good start. Here's some more cargo. This cargo up here, I know it's a little lighter than the other, but I left it that way because once I put this deck on, it's going to be pretty dark in there. And now you can obviously see that my shell lantern idea has worked out. This will be the closed inside, so just these cannon barrels will be sticking out. Let's go back down to that lower level because it also has the lanterns. Now up here you can see my wiring, but this will be covered. And where there's wiring here, I'll probably bring a plank down that far, or I'll put something over that, or I can just paint them black. I don't think they would show. Again, this layer you've all seen. I'm just having you revisit a little bit. I'm in the process of trying to pre-construct so that I know that everything is lining up okay. And I want to work my way down to where these cannon windows will be, so that I can pre-place the cannons in the right spot. These are not going to be glued in place right now. I'm just temporarily trying to work down to where these lower cannons will be. I'm getting close, and the instructions pretty much show this piece going to the edge of this framing, and then this one will overlap right there. So let me clamp that in place, and it should give me a good idea where the cannons will be. I've got this in place, and it looks like it's right where it should be because it leaves me some space right here where I can attach the rest of the planks that come around. So now I'll be able to go and mark where the cannons are going to be, and I'm going to use a peg, and I will drill a hole right in the center where the cannon goes in the base of the cannon itself, and then I can slide it in there and drop that peg down in the hole. The cannon can then swivel, and I hope that works. I've done it once before. Depending on the size of the cannon, I've used nails for this. In this case, I'm just doing a small piece of brass, and what I do is drill a hole right about here. In reality, I should have done this before I put the cannons on, because then you can drop a nail in from this side and the head of the nail will hold it in place. But I didn't think of it. I keep telling myself I need to make a book of notes. So I go back far enough that it won't, tear out the wood on the edge. So I don't know, not quite 1/4 of an inch. These are fairly small cannons. Cut a section, that's about 1 inch long. I'll shorten it after I get it in place. I'll make a small L and try and insert it in that hole and get it in there and spin it around. I may have to straighten it out. There it goes. So you probably can't see that well, but it is in there, and I will glue that in place with a little CA glue. That will not be visible. Then this I will insert into the hole that I drilled in the deck of the ship. I've drilled a hole where this cannon goes. So once it is where I want it to be, then I can bend this and now that cannon can pivot. We have to do a little work here because it's too tight up against this, but I can sand it off just a little. Just give you an idea how I'm doing that. In one of my earlier videos, I said I had done something a little bit special with the cannons. As I pass by them, see if you can notice what it is. That's a pretty good view right there. I took real small gemstones and put them so they would be facing out, so if the light hits it just right, it has a red glow. I did have to drill the holes in the cannons. They were solid, so I just took my drill press and drilled a small hole in them. There's a good view of the red, and again, just as you pass by, it'll glow if the light hits it just right. There are 2 different style cannon barrels. One has this little nub on the back, and the other is more plain. This one is larger. There's only one identified as Q2, and those go on the top deck. These larger ones go on the bottom deck. Then you also make these little wedges to position the barrels, and you'll need a very small bit to do by hand. I used my drill press, but this is very tedious because this is real small. But I did get it to work okay, and they are all in place. The instructions call to paint the hull black and then some thin white brushing to make it look aged, and I just do not like painting wood. I had this black cherry, and at first I was concerned because it has a very purple appearance. Then the more I thought about it, a dark, deep purple would be very good for this particular ship. If I want to darken it, I can take my airbrush and mist a black paint over it just to give some highlights. But after I stained it, it lost some of that raw purple color, and so it has a brownish tone to it. Now, I don't think this color is showing accurate, but I think I'm going to be pretty happy with that. I'm sticking with the mahogany for the deck, but the hull is going to be this black cherry. Once you finish planking the lower deck, the upper deck is very subtle that you plank it. And it's as subtle as E18 is the piece that comes, on the placard, unplanked, just raw wood. And then E19 points to the planks. And they're basically the exact same wood that you used for the lower. deck, and you do it on all the upper deck pieces. These are the main deck pieces, and I go ahead and I stain them even though they will be covered with planks. I left the little white spots, that's where the part number is. That way, if there's a little crack or anything that might show through, I've got the color underneath that's approximately the same as the planks. In addition, I've stained up several planks. I will get these cut to size and start installing them. A little upset with myself. I just went over and grabbed a piece of wood, not paying close enough attention. And you notice this one is wider planks than this one. I could rip them off, but I'm going to do this very, very dark. So I don't think it's going to be that noticeable. They're a little bit of ways from each other. I'm working on these back walls and doorways that go on the rear of the ship. I have them made, and the instructions call again to paint them black and then kind of gray them with white. I am going to go with this black cherry that I've been working with, and I'm going to put it on as dark as I possibly can. Then if I need to darken it even more, I will use my airbrush and some black paint and just mist it until it gets as dark as I want. This is after the first coat, and this is kind of the color I'm going for. These two are a little lighter for some reason, but I will let this dry, a couple hours, and then I'll come back and do another coating of stain and then wipe it off after it's been on about 5 minutes. You know, I mentioned that I always stain before gluing. On these I did not, and here's an example of when you get glue residue that you can't even see. It'll show up when you try to stain there and there. And what I will do, I'll age this somehow. I'll either nick it up or and take some black and smudge it in. And the doors need to be rustic anyway, so it's kind of okay that it's got some faded spots, but I will work on that some. But that's a good example of why to stain first. Paint doesn't matter, but stain absolutely matters. You can always paint over stain, but you can never stain over paint. These are the planks for the deck, and I'll be cutting them down to 65 millimeter in lengths, but I want to darken those edges. Remember, the instructions suggest pencil. I prefer a permanent marker. This is just a Sharpie. It's a little wider than your standard, and I purposely kind of cut a little V right in there so it'll kind of hold it in the direction that I want it to be. And I just pull the plank through and color that edge. Once I do cut them into the length, I'll go back and I'll darken the edges. I'm inserting this update because at this point, you know, I actually used the wrong planks. I should have used these very, very thin ones, and I should have known better. But to darken the edge of these, and the other ones for that matter, you can clip several together and then just take your marker and do a bunch at the same time. Then you'll turn it over and repeat on the other side. There you go. And you can see there's a nice black edge. Subtle, but it helps the plank stand out. And that's any plank, regardless where it's going to be. I have the planking done for this upper deck, and to get the holes back in place, and these are rectangular or square, I put a piece of painter's tape on there, flipped it over, took it over my drill press, matched the size. The square ones I did smaller, and now I'll take a file and make those square, and the masking tape helps stop the wood from splintering when you drill through it. When you're planking, if you want to be extra picky, you'll notice this particular plank has kind of a diamond shaped pattern. That's from I think the cutting of the wood or the processing of it. I try to make sure that I put all those to the bottom. I missed this one piece. So I went ahead and twinned it over here, but the rest of them are all facing the right way, I think. So I'm making good progress on the planking. The instructions do have you do this pattern where it's every other is where a seam is. The longest ones are 65 millimeters, the shorter ones are half that. I think I would prefer just having these at random spaces, different areas. I've done both now, and I prefer the random as to having this obvious pattern. Instead of going by Boiler Dan, I should go by Bumbler Dan. All the planking I did on the decks, I used the wrong wood. The dimensions as far as the width and length were the same, but the width was completely different. I should have known better. I even thought to myself, this seems awfully thick, because what I should have been using is this very thin planking material because the deck already has thickness. That was going to throw off how the cannons position themselves. I would have to cut all the windows differently, and who knows what else would go wrong. I first noticed it on the bow of the ship, this piece. I was having trouble getting it to fit in. I went to my belt sander, not the tiny one, I have a large one, and sanded all of these down to the approximate thickness that I need. So I've done that. This I did a little too thin, so what I've done is I've peeled these off and I will replace these with the new thinner and then stain all of it. Again, I had it all stained. So that was pretty disappointing and frustrating in myself, but as you know, I'm not an engineer and I do not build models for perfection. I build them for the enjoyment of the challenge. And this has turned out to be a challenge for me. So what I might do is, because I will be short of this thicker wood, I'm investigating ordering some walnut of the size that I need. And this is 2 millimeters by 5 millimeters by 500 millimeters in length. Order that in black walnut and do the planking of the hull of the ship in black walnut. So that's what I'm researching. That's it for episode 5. Obviously, I ran into some challenges. I think I've overcome the challenges, but it's just a good example of why, as shipbuilders, we should take our time, not rush, maybe double check myself before I start gluing things together. This is Boiler Dan 1, and more than ever, thanks for watching.